Have you ever noticed how Japanese NEETs don't seem to have Anhedonia? Like every single Hehehe Komori documentary that you'll find, all of them tend to play a lot of video games. Like I remember watching this one documentary. It had this Australian fag, and he was like, "Oh man, Hehehe Komori are such a bizarre phenomenon." And he went into this guy's room, and it was weird because he was like awkwardly like touching the guy when like the Japanese guy clearly did not want to be touched, but he was like, all right, do better, buddy. I'm gonna tap you on the wrist now. Do better." And it's like, okay, dude, stop tapping that hikikomori on the wrist. Like you know this guy probably does not want physical contact. He's been in his fucking room for years now. He barely talks to his parents. Why are you touching him? But he was, this weird condescending Australian guy that they had for like the BBC or something. I have no idea. It was this random hikikomori documentary. But all of the people who they surveyed in that video, and in a bunch of these other documentaries you'll find, have like a really obsessive interest in media. And I kind of contrast this with hikikomori and NEETs in the US, is that in the US, you look on image boards and so on, and they always talk about how they don't feel strong emotions the way that they used to, which in and of itself is an anhedonia, but they always talk about it in relation to media, is that they try to consume things and they don't enjoy any of it. Nothing particularly sticks out to them. They try to play a video game and they remember that nostalgia, that amazing feeling that used to quake over them as they played whatever. And now they don't quite feel anything. In fact, the act of doing it might even make them sad because they look at what they're doing and they just don't enjoy any of it. They try to watch an anime and they can't even particularly focus because they don't enjoy the act of watching it. There's just nothing. It's like their entire existence is void of not just any meaning, but any emotion at all except for sadness, that the only thing that they can do in the wake of that is just kind of lay around and look at stuff on the computer, because that requires the least amount of effort that they can possibly put in, because that's all they have to give. And it's very interesting drawing this comparison, because I don't really get anhedonia very often. Usually when I'm depressed, I can't watch anime as easily, but it's only if it's like a really bad show, and I think most people are like that. I don't think most people can put up with bad shows, but in a lot of times, in a lot of cases, I tend to not watch anime as easily when I'm depressed. Whereas with a video game, like, I cheer up right away. I start, getting excited to play the game, and I have more fun. Or at least it distracts me. Like, the depression will still be there, but a video game will be a good distraction. Listening to music, I kind of get out of focus. Listening to a podcast or whatever. There's usually distractions that keep me from thinking about it too much or from being bothered by it in any significant way. And the depression doesn't show up a whole bunch. In a significant sense. Like, when it's there, there's always media that I can use as a distraction, But there have been times in the past where, like, anhedonia really, really set in when I was on medications, for instance. But that was an induced kind of thing, where, the reason why I just couldn't enjoy anything is because the medications I was taking exacerbated the problem, made it much worse, And there have been other times when, like, really bad stuff was going on in life, and I sort of felt that way, or I, like, wasn't getting to eat food because we were really poor and stuff, but it's more of a circumstantial thing. So I don't really relate to the feeling of getting, like, chronic anhedonia, especially not from isolating, where, like, I would be isolated for a couple years, and I still wouldn't get this sense that I don't enjoy anything I do. I would still really enjoy watching a movie or playing a video game or watching a video, listening to a podcast. It would still be fun to me. I would still have fun doing things throughout the day, and I still wanted to do things throughout the day, even after a very large amount of time just completely in my room. And so in that sense, I relate more to the Japanese NEETs, because the Japanese NEETs, it's like they look at life with the understanding that all of the stuff they have in their room is entertainment. That's the sense that I get from them, where they are withdrawn and there's clearly mental health problems there, but their mental health problems aren't so severe that they are completely locked out of enjoying anything. It's more like they live in their own world. That's the sense that I relate to more, is that when I've been isolated, I have been in my own world. I've enjoyed the media that I've consumed. I've had lots of media to consume, and that's the place that I've been in. I've gotten depressed in the past, and I've like had this feeling of like, oh, I must become a normie, and everything is boring now, I must become a normie. But usually days like that like go away after like 2 days. Like, they don't really last very long. But with these folks in the West on image boards, for instance, they describe how like every single day they just can't enjoy anything, and they've been like this for like over a year and this kind of thing. And I've never had that. The longest that I felt that way has been like a week, and usually like I said, due to medication problems, where I had never felt that way before, but the moment I got off the medication I didn't feel that way anymore, or just like really, really horrible stuff was going on way back when. I've never like chronically felt that I just didn't enjoy anything. There's always been more things to enjoy. There's always been things that helped out with the problem, where like even when I was living in Maine and my medications were like really messing me up, I could still play like Half-Life 2, and Half-Life 2 was like the one thing I enjoyed, and so I played that as a distraction. I mean, that was constant suffering living there, is that all the time I just felt like nothing I consumed was enjoyable. I was so fundamentally depressed. But Japanese NEETs, they just live in their own world. And I think there are some of the more higher power level NEETs in the US. I mean, I'm not a NEET anymore, but when I used to be a NEET, I had the high power level where I could just endlessly be entertained in my own world. There were always just more things to consume, always, more things to do. My imagination was there. The sky was the limit. In the West, it seems like there's more pity. There's a sense that you should feel bad for being this way, and I've never really felt bad for being this way. I've taken the normie route of getting the advice, and then people tell you, oh, become a normie, man, become a normie, you gotta do it, and in moments of depression, I thought, well, okay, I feel pretty bad today, maybe I do need to become a normie, and I'll never get depressed, ever. And then I tried doing that, and it turned out that I didn't like it very much. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that, in the West, like, every single day people will have this self-pity where they're like, I have to be a normie, and society tells me I must be normal, and this kind of thing. I've never really felt bad for it. I've more so just had, like, random days where I'm thinking, hey, maybe being a normie isn't so bad. Maybe that'll fix me up. And then realizing that didn't work. But I've only ever felt that way after, like, a few years of being isolated, or at least a year, is that after that long of an amount of time, you begin to forget what it was like in the real world, and then once you go back, you realize that you don't like it very much, at least in my case. But I think a lot of people in the West, like, they desperately don't want to be in that situation. They desperately want to be normies, and so they have this, like, self-guilt victim mentality about themselves, and so they're much more prone to anhedonia. They really don't want to be in that situation because the situation wasn't designed for them. That's not who they are. Whereas someone like me, this is just who I am. I just enjoy doing these things more than I would the real world. Where there are hikis in Japan who, might be a little bit depressed. They might have some clear mental health problems, but even they enjoy what it is that they're doing, because it's an escape. It's like their imagination that they're inside of, And of course, there's some of them who just prefer it, who might not want to get out at all. They just enjoy their life as it is. Now, I watched this documentary. It was an RT documentary about this guy who rehabilitated hikis. This like 70-year-old guy, and he would go into their houses and he would have them come to these meetings each week where they would come outside and they would just talk about their problems and stuff and what was going on. I remember there was this one Japanese guy who was at this circle that they were all sitting in talking about being hikis, and he basically just said straight up, I like my lifestyle and I don't want to change. And I was like, well, why is this guy here then? But I wonder, maybe it's just the constant feed of negativity that's in Western image board culture or something, that it seems like the NEETs that are the loudest and the ones that you get the most exposure to all hate it. They all desperately want to be like the normies in their lives. And they don't like isolation. They don't enjoy anything anymore. They get anhedonia, and that's an experience that by and large I can't relate to. I can only find small pockets where I've gotten that specific symptom before. And in that sense, I think I align more with Japan.